Hey guys, how's it going? I'm here to talk to you about logical fallacies. This is part of that critical thinking component of our course. Obviously, anytime you're applying a lens, analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating information, that's critical thinking. And so we've been doing critical thinking throughout the unit. But logical fallacies in particular are part of critical thinking in that they're new concepts and new terms. So, logical fallacies are basically problems or failures in the logic of an argument. If you remember way back to when we talked about inductive and deductive arguments, we talked about how deductive arguments are logically sound, in that if premise A and premise B is true, then the conclusion must follow. Logically, the conclusion must follow. It's true. Logical fallacies are different in that they do not rest on any sort of logical foundation, that they are flawed logical arguments. Logical fallacies are not in and of themselves like problems. So by that I mean they are super, super effective. If you've been paying attention to any of the political discussions this cycle, then you will know that logical fallacies are employed constantly, all the time, by all sides, by all parties, because they are so effective. If you can detect logical fallacies, then it makes you a stronger critical thinker. It allows you to kind of weed through all the flawed arguments and allows you to rest and draw your conclusions based solely on what matters most, and that would be like facts and actual information. But if you don't spend that time using those critical thinking skills, then it's really easy to be susceptible to logical fallacies. So again, I just wanted to reiterate that there's nothing inherently problematic in logical fallacies except for that they're untrue, but they are effective rhetorical strategies. And so when you are making an argument for something, sometimes it becomes effective to use logical fallacy because it's easier to convince your audience. So we'll walk through some logical fallacies together. Take a look at the screen here. Slippery slope. This is a logical fallacy that basically means you go from cause and effect to cause and effect. Instead of, A causes B, you jump over all the options and you end up with something really drastic at Z. So for example, anytime you're like, wow, that escalated quickly, that's an example of slippery slope. A hasty generalization is basically a stereotype. It's drawing a conclusion based off way too limited of evidence. Sometimes that evidence is also biased. So that's a hasty generalization. The post hoc is basically a false cause and effect. So basically assigning a cause or assigning a result to a cause that wasn't necessarily true. So my favorite example that I like to use is way back when, for A's fans, Josh Reddick, one of the baseball players, changed his walk-up music, and he started going on a hot streak and had a bunch of hits and was doing really well. So the post hoc fallacy would be, because he changed his walk-up music, then he started doing better on the field, right? There's actually no real correlation there. There's no scientific evidence to suggest that relationship exists. But that would be a logical fallacy, right? A post hoc logical fallacy. The genetic fallacy is basically whoever came up with the idea is problematic, and so therefore we cannot use the idea at all. We see this we see this often where whatever was the originator of the idea, that means that because there's a problem with them, we can't take anything that they said or anything that they did with any validity. The either or fallacy is my personal favorite. Either this is true or this is true. It's one that I like to incorporate as often as possible because it really sets up a two option situation. Right, so either you didn't listen to me in class when I told you what the homework is, or you didn't care and you didn't want to do the homework. Right? That's a logical fallacy because obviously there's plenty of other options here. You didn't understand the homework, my instructions weren't clear, you did the homework but didn't turn it in, something like legitimately relevant got in the way, right? There's so many other options, but reducing it to two options is where that fallacy comes in. An ad hominem logical fallacy is a personal attack. Rather than responding to an idea, it's attacking the character of a person. Bandwagon appeal is basically everybody thinks it, so you should think it too. It gets the idea from sports where people jump on this bandwagon and all support the same team. So it's similar in that, well, everybody likes this idea. You're the only one who doesn't like it, so there must be something wrong with you, right? That's a fallacy there. The red herring is mostly about transitioning the discussion away from the issues at hand, right? And so we see this often, like people will talk about, oh, we need to do something for climate change, and then people bring up, well, like the economy. And it's like, well, that's a different thing. It's like kind of related, but now you've switched the conversation, right? That's the red herring fallacy. The straw man fallacy is an oversimplification of your opponent's perspective, right? So a common one is that feminists hate men. That's an oversimplification of what it means to be a feminist. And it's really powerful because people are like, well, I don't want to be a feminist because I don't hate men, right? And so that's an example of a straw man fallacy. It's an oversimplification of someone's perspective. Moral equivalence is where you inflate two issues. The most common one is like the comparison to Hitler, right? Like, this is as bad as Hitler. That's like a moral equivalent, right? So we see that like commonly used. And so basically this fallacy, like some minor issue, is related to a larger issue. We probably saw this a lot with the Me Too movement, right? We talked about in class Joe Biden, right, like rubbing women's shoulders, right, comparing that to Harvey Weinstein, who was, like actually just convicted of rape, right? That would be a moral equivalent fallacy. And so there's lots of fallacies here. Take a look at the examples, take a look at the definitions. Let me know if you have questions. But I did want to just walk you through what they are and give you an overview of the examples just briefly. Your assignment next, your discussion will ask you to dig deeper into these issues. So go ahead again, give me shoot me the email, or we'll do office hours or something if you have questions.